several educational initiatives being considered as government works to turn Barbados' fortunes around. Members of the Senate confident government can navigate the island's economic recovery. And Barbados records another road fatality.
Credible, balanced, committed. This is the CBC Evening News.
Good evening, I'm Shane Jones, leading the news at 7. A number of educational initiatives are being considered as government works to turn Barbados' fortunes around. Some of them were disclosed by Prime Minister Mia Motley during a forum with the staff and students of the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus called A Conversation with the Prime Minister. Lorna Jones reports.
Prime Minister Mia Motley has strongly defended the government's decision to reinstitute free tuition for UWI Cave Hill undergraduate students. She says education is necessary to take Barbados forward and ensure the country becomes a force to be reckoned with globally.
There has never been any doubt, never in my mind, as to what is our responsibility as a nation and to whom we must exercise that responsibility. We cannot, in this country, seek to be global citizens if we are not prepared to educate our people. And I want to repeat it because the absence of an education is a death sentence.
Among the initiatives which will be explored are some which the Prime Minister described as simple but with far-reaching implications.
By 2030, every child under the age of 18 in this country should have been given an opportunity to be bilingual. Whether it is Spanish and English, whether it is Mandarin and English, you cannot live in today's world without the functionality of being able to communicate in multiple languages.
An extension to the university is also being considered.
The University of the West Indies ought to have a college, and we will give you access to land on the East Coast, that allows you to do 2 private sector-driven disciplines and 2 public sector-driven disciplines, where you literally take the best students from universities across the world. We need to choose 4 disciplines, and we need to do exchange programs for you going to those universities and their students coming here. Because nobody must ask in 10 years' time, where is Barbados?
Prime Minister Motley says a comprehensive review of the university's program offerings will also be undertaken to ensure UWI maintains high standards. Lorna Jones, CBC News.
Thanks, Lorna. Prime Minister Mia Motley was among regional leaders of the shareholder governments of LIAT in St. Vincent and the Grenadines who were updated on the technical committee report on the restructuring of the regional airline. Now, the meeting was chaired by Chairman of the Shareholder Governments and Vincentian Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves. LIAT is engaged in restructuring as part of its efforts to achieve greater profitability and improve efficiency. Dr. Gonsalves says it was made clear to all present that it could not be business as usual. Dr. Gonsalves said there have been calls for some time now for a new airline or to have LIAT privatized. While some are in favor of these options, he notes there are others who are not. The Board of the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation met with the management and staff of the corporation today to discuss the imminent impact on CBC of the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation, or BERT program, which the government of Barbados has embarked on as part of its management with the International Monetary Fund. Board Chairman Melba Smith told staff everyone is aware CBC is one of the state-owned enterprises which is to be restructured in Phase 1 of the BERT program. She added that, as Prime Minister Mia Motley stated in her recent broadcast to the nation, restructuring in Phase 1 must be completed by the end of the year. Mrs. Smith acknowledged restructuring will result in a decrease in the staff complement and that the board is mindful any restructuring exercise must be done in compliance with the Employment Rights Act. As a consequence, the board will be holding discussions with the union representing the bargaining unit at the CBC, the Barbados Workers' Union. While those discussions have not yet started, the CBC chairman told the staff the board was of the view that they needed to let staff know what was imminent. She emphasized that staff who are not part of the bargaining unit will be treated no less favorably than those persons represented by the BWU. She explains because the discussions with the union must take place first, in keeping with proper industrial relations protocols, there was not much more that she could add at this time. However, she gave the commitment there would be further communication with staff at appropriate points during the negotiations with the union. Mrs. Smith said that all the members of the board recognize that this is a stressful time and that stress will take its toll. She stated, quote, "I have asked the HR manager to make sure that network services, that's counseling services, will be available to staff who need it," end quote. The chairman gave the assurance all staff who are to be severed will be treated fairly and in accordance with the terms outlined by the Prime Minister when she addressed the nation on October 14th. The chairman of the Barbados Water Authority, Mrs. Leodine Worrell, met with employees of the authority today to discuss government's ongoing restructuring exercise. Joined by other members of the board, Mrs. Worrell told the over 700 employees that they are mindful that the restructuring exercise must be done in consultation with the union in compliance with the Employment Rights Act, as well as the principles of fairness and natural justice. She says she especially wishes to re-emphasize the phrase principles of fairness and natural justice, as officials are aware that a tremendous fear of victimization and favoritism exists among the staff of the BWA. The staff sessions were held at the BWA's Pine headquarters. The trade union umbrella body, the Congress of Trade Unions and Staff Associations of Barbados, is monitoring developments with government's retrenchment exercise. Newly elected President Edwin O'Neill says the levels of consultation and discussion remain an area of concern, as no trade union will ever be comfortable with job losses. Mr. O'Neill highlighted issues relating to the impact on an already short-staffed police force, saying he was informed clerical officers were among those slated to be sent home.
It seems to me that that is a void that has to be filled. And who will fill it? Obviously, policemen. The police force is already experiencing a shortage, and if these clerical posts are to be filled, that is going to escalate or accentuate the level of that shortage.
Now, during a meet and greet session with the media at the headquarters of the Barbados Union of Teachers, Mr. O'Neill said CITUSAB was responding to concerns brought to its attention by its member units. He highlighted matters affecting the Prison Officers Association.
It is untenable. It is undesirable, not only from the position of the prison officers being a representative association, but the impact on national security. It is regrettable that the authorities have not moved with more haste and decisiveness in dealing with that. And it is one of the areas that we will have to as it were, light a fire under the bonnet to bring resolution to that.
Meantime, General Secretary Dennis DePisa says there has been no negotiations with CITUSAB on a number of current aspects, including government's restructuring exercise. Mr. DePisa is telling government discussions at the level of social partnership cannot replace active negotiations with trade unions.
CITUSAB has constantly been saying we need to look at the aspect of growth. That's a negotiation point. That's a point that we're looking at a fund development. When we go to the social partnership meeting, we are going to find out how are we going to address this issue of growth in order that we can sustain our levels of employment, we can see a bond economy, we can see the idea of investment programs rolling over. We are hearing about, for example, there are projects coming on the street. We've been hearing that for time immemorial. But what is important to see is that when are they going to be implemented? How soon?
Mr. De Pisa called on the private sector to declare its hand and make it clear what it will be doing to aid in the island's recovery.
That we are still going to hear. We are hearing about all the restructuring, cutting the expenditure, pulling people off the bread line, but we're not hearing what the private sector of Barbados is going to do in order to ensure that Barbados returns to a state of some stability economically.
Staying on the issue of retrenchment and turning to the upper house, where we're hearing a large majority of Barbadians have confidence in the government in navigating Barbados' recovery. These were the words of Deputy President of the Senate, Rudolph Greenidge, as he threw his support behind the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation team. As the upper house debated the Debt Holder Bill 2018, Mr. Greenidge said Barbados will be open for business once again.
These measures, sir, are aimed at providing the country with an investment culture. And it is happening because our Prime Minister has surrounded herself with competent professionals who can provide her with good, sound advice. There will still be naysayers. You can't get away from it. You will still have naysayers. And the naysayers can smile. But I have every confidence in her ability and her team's ability to grow this economy.
Well, as government seeks to restructure its debt, it must do so with compassion. Independent Senator Reverend Michael St. John Maxwell charges the administration needs to be mindful of every individual that will be affected.
And a just and fair society, Mr. Deputy President, needs to be ever mindful of those individuals and what they're going through. They may be vulnerable. The government, the caring government, should never assume that everyone has the means or the wherewithal to go without their investment for the next year or so, though they're being guaranteed the full principal and interest paid by the end of the 15 years.
As Barbados currently endures a difficult period of layoffs, a government senator is stressing that the process is not a personal one. Senator Lisa Cummins says government is being professional in carrying out the retrenchments.
There are no ministers pulling any list to go through to see who's from their constituency in this retrenchment. There's no minister sending out lists from his constituency to see who is from his constituency and who's not so that we can choose who's going home. That's not what's happening here. That is not what is happening in this moment. There is an overall rationalization that is taking place by post and not by person. The government of Barbados is not sending home people only to rehire other persons who are their supporters. That is not what is happening here.
Government Senator Lynette Holder is hopeful Barbados will regain the level of foreign investment it enjoyed a decade ago. She says since then, the island declined significantly, especially in relation to foreign investment. According to her, however, that is changing.
We are optimistic that with investor confidence returning to Barbados, that again we will see the kind of investment that Barbados was known for. And what do I mean by that? Private sector investment, Mr. President, in 2007 was at $1.2 billion. $1.2 billion. By 2017, 10 years later, Mr. President, private sector investment was a paltry $311 million.
There's been a fatal accident along Hastings Main Road in Christchurch. CBC News understands a man was traveling on a motorcycle which was involved in a collision with a car. Police PRO Station Sergeant Michael Blackman told reporters the man received help on the scene.
With the assistance of 3 female nurses from a nearby medical facility. The police were able to assist a young man who had sustained injuries as a result of the fall. He was taken to the QEH by ambulance where he succumbed to his injuries.
In a separate incident, lawmen have been investigating another accident in Christchurch, this time at Graham Hall. Police reports are that 3 vehicles were involved and 6 people are said to be injured. Meanwhile, there are reports of an armed robbery at Richmond Road, St. Michael. According to lawmen, a lone gunman robbed 2 women of a handbag, money, phones, and jewelry. The value of the items is unknown. 2 people were reportedly injured during the incident, which occurred at about 10 minutes after 12 this afternoon. Several improvements are coming to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital that are expected to provide some much-needed relief. Minister of Health and Wellness, Lieutenant Colonel Geoffrey Bostic, announced plans for a minor cases unit, an observation ward, and a discharge lounge. The latter, he says, will help free up bed space.
We have situations in which a number of patients would have been discharged officially by the doctors, let's say, in the morning. But they have to wait. They have to wait in order to get medication or whatever, or they're waiting on relatives. And they're actually in the wards, in the beds, because that's the only place that we have at the moment for them. And then that is taking up bed space, critical bed space that is required for the entire hospital and also from the accident and emergency department. And that will be implemented shortly.
Mr. Bostic wants to see the QEH made climate resilient. During his contribution to debate on the National Insurance and Social Security Bill 2018, he acknowledged going this route will not only take time, but also money.
And that is so because in places like Dominica, for example, who were in similar situation to ours, after the impact of the hurricanes in Dominica, the hospital, the major hospital in Dominica, could not provide the level of services that were expected. And that is something that we have to guard against.
Despite the strides made over the years in treating breast cancer patients, some Barbadian women remain unsure as to why they should undergo mammograms and ultrasounds. Medical coordinator of the breast screening program of the Barbados Cancer Society, Dr. Shirley Jagru, says they'll seek to educate Barbadians more as there remains some level of confusion. Dr. Jagru was a guest on CBC TV8's Morning Barbados.
And as the number of requests for ultrasounds increases, that confuses the general public even more. So that patients come and ask, well, why can I not have an ultrasound? Why do I have to have this mammogram thing? You know, that's the usual question. So this is the reason for us bringing in this young lady all the way from Jamaica.
You're very kind, young lady.
And another doctor from Trinidad to explain to the general public why we do mammograms and why we do ultrasounds in early detection of breast cancer.
Senior lecturer at UWI Mona and consultant radiologist Deanne Soares reminded women self-examination is important. She's of the view mammography is one of the best ways for early detection of breast cancer.
It's not perfect, but it's the best way. And ultrasound is often used as an adjunct, or if you have a young patient who is under the age for screening generally, like below 40, who has a symptom, you start with ultrasound.
A lack of maintenance has been identified as being behind the deterioration of some educational institutions. In recent weeks, a number of schools, including Lester Vaughan, had to be closed to undergo cleaning and other maintenance work. Assistant General Secretary of C2SAB, Sean Spencer, says they aren't seeing the evidence of any meaningful or systematic inspection of the plants. Mr. Spencer is the current president of the Barbados Union of Teachers.
When I refer to deterioration, I'm not just referring to cosmetic issues of paint which may be peeling, but the presence of termite infestation, fences and poles which have long divorced, issues where we have an absence of handrails which pose difficulties for a person to traverse plants when it is wet, sagging floorboards which are in some cases rather aged, And these are some of the hazards which present, and there are other potential hazards as well. The prevalence of mildew, fungus, and mold, these are issues which have to be dealt with, and we have brought to the attention of the requisite ministries.
Another area of concern for Mr. Spencer is the absence of adequate security guards.
We have cases where there is no longer a fence and cows are allowed to roam and traverse freely. Neighbors are able to do likewise, and we're seeing that in some cases it can cause an occasion to arise where there's harm being imposed to the children of the country in the nation's schools. When we look at the matter of security guards, what is really puzzling is the fact that, one, we have some schools which have a hut provided for the accommodation of the security guards, but there's no guard. In other cases, we have an instance where you have a guard who is serving multiple plants, 2 or 3 plants in some cases, we're told.